welcome back to another great episode of Just Be You podcast. I am your host, Zelia, and I'm here joined by another amazing guest, because every guest that comes on here is amazing in their own special way. And I just, this has just become my thing. I love my show, and I love all the people that I've been able to come across through my show. And today we're going to be talking about communication, one of the big things that we all struggle with. There's tons of conversations. And I just hope that in today's episode, you gain some wisdom, some practical tools that you can use. Because if you feel like you can't communicate, you are not alone. We all struggle in that area. And that's something that we're going to continue to work on. The more we grow, someone changes their situations, and we just are in this learning curve together. So give a big round of applause to my guest today, Leilany, and I'm so excited. How are you doing today?
I am doing great, and I'm excited to be here.
Yes. So my first question is, how did you get your start in communication? What was your starting point? Because I feel like a lot of times, just people as a whole, we're like, oh, I want to do this, or I want to start that, but we don't really know how to. What's the starting point? So how did you get into this?
Great question. So this goes pretty far back into, in college, my undergrad was in psychology. I was always fascinated by communication, reading, writing, nonverbal communication, anything that really had to do with the interaction between humans. So in my undergrad, I studied everything that had to do with counseling, relationships, and I got to do some fantastic internships, even at that stage in my life, where we learned communication skills. And then as I left university or graduated university and moved on into my career, the work that I went into was counseling. And so it was learning to have really challenging conversations at times with folks who were really challenged to communicate. So, learned a lot about asking the right questions and active listening and reflective listening and non-judgmental listening.
Oh, wow.
And how you're probably going to express things through your face and through your body language. I have a very expressive face. I talk a lot with my hands. So, even in my early 20s, I started to really become cognizant of how those things could come across to another person. So communication really started off as just a part of my career and a part of my general curiosity.
Yeah, I can agree there, because a lot of what you said, I remember I was at a work meeting and I was legit confused about something. I guess my facial expression didn't read my level of confusion. Because then that was a discussion afterwards. I was like, my bad. I was just confused by what was happening. So that was an interesting thing. And you mentioned listening, and there's different types of listening. Can you expand on that? Because I've never heard that part of the equation before.
Absolutely. Right, because half of communication is listening.
True.
Folks tend to forget that. They think that's just the expressive part.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when we are in communication with others and perhaps we are not fully present, we might be thinking about the next thing we're going to say, and we have tuned out the other person. We're not trying to, we're just so eager to respond to them, or we're so eager to say whatever it is that we've got inside, that if we were asked to recall what they just explained, we wouldn't be able to. Right? And again, this can come from if we're feeling a little bit of anxiety. So let's say maybe you're talking to your boss, or maybe you're talking to a love interest, and you're in kind of an anxious state. So you're just thinking about, oh, what am I going to say in response? And, am I going to have the right thing to say? And you didn't hear a thing that they said.
Yeah.
That can happen. And so the active listening part is practicing coming to a place where you can be okay with some silence. Practicing
Mhm.
saying, okay, while this other person is speaking, my only job here is not to think about my response, but actually it's to make sure that I am understanding what
Mhm.
they are communicating with me. And so, how that works with, let's say, reflective listening is if you were to share something with me, Delia, I would say, okay, well, this is what I heard. And I would have had to be listening to be able
Yeah.
to say this back. Here's what I heard. Is this what you meant? Did I get that right? And now I pause and I give you the opportunity to confirm whether or not I got that. And
Got
what
it.
this does is it gives you an opportunity to feel really witnessed by me. It gives us both an opportunity to see, are we on the same page? Right. And then I know, okay, now that I've really understood what she said, ah, now I can choose how I'm going to respond.
Got it.
Totally different from what often happens, where you've maybe had this happen in relationships. That's where it tends to come up,
Yes.
where someone will say, that's not what I said. That's not what I meant. And now we've got two very triggered, very activated people. And this could have been avoided if we had just checked in and said, is this what you meant? This is what I heard. I might have perceived this wrong. So before we take a step forward, did I get this right?
Yeah, no, I love that. I feel like on that part, I should have totally invited my husband into that part because I mean, we've known each other for like 20 years. So a lot of times, yes, he knows me pretty well, but I'm like, you don't know every single passing thought that goes through my mind. So like when we're having discussions, he's like, oh, I know what you're gonna say. And I'm like, I wasn't gonna say that, but thanks, try again. So that's definitely helpful. And I know that that happens like in a lot of relationships. It's like, oh, I know what you're gonna say, and you kind of beat me to the punch. And it's like, yeah, that wasn't the punch that I was drinking right now. So
We sometimes make assumptions. And we all know
yeah.
what happens when we make assumptions. Like we all know that little line.
Yes.
Yeah, if we come to every conversation from the mindset of, I might discover something brand new. So if I just come in with like ears open, mind open, I could learn something from this interaction
Yeah.
versus again, skipping ahead to, well, what am I going to say?
Yeah. No, that's great because that was gonna be my next question. I'm like, should we be setting like an intention before, we decide to communicate with somebody? But I know sometimes that isn't always like an opportunity we're granted. So just like the whole mindset behind it. So we were in the same wavelength. So cool.
Great question. So I would say it's going to depend on the type of conversation that you're having, right? When I call up my best friend or when I leave her a voice message and vice versa, I'm not coming with an exact intention behind it. We recognize like, hey, this is going to be a dumping session.
Yeah.
We've known each other for long enough that, we might start a conversation with like, I just need you to listen or I need advice. So we let the other person know what to expect.
Got
But if you are going to go into a conversation, let's say that might have some challenging aspects to it. Again,
it.
maybe it's a conversation about something within your relationship, or maybe you're a manager and you need to give some constructive but challenging feedback to one of your employees. Yes, absolutely. Take a moment to set the intention beforehand of, why are we having this conversation? And what is the outcome that I would like to get to? Because it's certainly going to change the lens through which you see the other person, as well as the words you choose to communicate with them.
Yeah. No, that's pretty. It always sounds so simple until you're you're in the midst of it and you're like, "Oh, what am I supposed to do now again?" So in your experience, what do you think are the like top two or three things that where people get it wrong when it comes to like communication, and they may not even be, they may not be aware of it either, because this is just how they've seen, you know, their parents or how they were exposed to communication.
Yeah. So I think one of them, a big one, is, you know, what we just talked about, is assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes because we've maybe known somebody for a long time, we might assume how they're going to respond.
Yeah.
And it doesn't actually give them the opportunity to show up as they are in the present moment. So, yeah, challenge number one is making assumptions. We can practice just trying not to do it again, coming with a curious and open mind. Um, Another one is when we maybe haven't processed what it is that we need to communicate before we go into that conversation.
Hmm.
So people tend to fall on a spectrum of either they have no filter and they blurt out everything before they thought about it at all. So pros and cons to this.
Yeah.
On the other end of the spectrum, we have folks who are so in their head and they're processing everything internally that they really struggle to get that out and verbalized to the other person. So we want to kind of notice, where do I fall on that spectrum? And how can I come to a place where I know what it is that I want to communicate, and I'm basically let's say making like a bullet point list of that before I go
Mm-hmm.
into this conversation. So knowing your own intentions beforehand and making sure that what you communicate is mindful of the other person as well. So yeah, it's self-awareness. Know thyself first.
Yeah.
Because if we haven't really thought through, let's say we go into a conversation from a very reactive state, we might say things that we later regret,
Mm-hmm.
that we wish we could take back, and we cannot.
Yeah.
So taking that moment to pause beforehand can really help.
Yeah.
Self-awareness, taking some deep breaths, checking in, what is my desired outcome for this? Is it to be right? Right? Like, am I calling this person up
Mm.
because I'm feeling angry? I'm feeling very activated. I want somebody to blurt all of this out to. What am I hoping the end outcome is going to be from this?
Yeah.
So taking responsibility and ownership for that self-awareness piece is really important.
Oh, yeah. I love that. That's one thing we can all just benefit from. And not in like in all types of way, not even just you know, just the communication aspect. Just, you know, it's okay sometimes to say, oh, I goofed, I'm sorry, you know, I'll be better about it next time. But then, you know, egos get in the way in situations, kind of prevent it. So that's a honest way to just kind of go about it. So I like that. So simple, guys, so simple.
Ownership. Ownership.
Yes, ownership. That's like ownership and intention. I feel like that's like the year, or at least the tone of 2023, and a lot more people are becoming more aware of it and sensitive to it, and are really trying to make those changes so we can get along. We may not be saying kumbaya, but
Not yet. Probably not yet. But we might be moving more towards that direction.
yeah. And that's all we can hope for, right?
Yeah, yeah. The more we improve our communication, the more we allow for an opportunity to have true, genuine, kind, loving connection with others. So
Yeah, I love that. So how much of a piece is trust and safety in communication, whether you're trying to convey something to someone else or you're trying to actively listen?
you have the best questions. Um, so I will say that this is also a twofold piece. The first one is, how much trust do you have in yourself? And
Oh.
then how much trust do you have in the other, right? Like, do you trust that you can speak honestly? Or do you notice that when you do speak up, that actually you're still withholding, that there are parts of your voice that you are still repressing out of probably an underlying fear that you may not even be aware of, right?
Yeah.
How much do you trust yourself? Or with folks who are more on that end of the spectrum of blurting things out,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they have gotten feedback in their life of when they're angry, right? They communicate from an angry space. Now that they have that awareness, they might even have a concern of, ooh, in the past, I've communicated really angrily. Do I trust myself to actually communicate in a way that's productive? So, self awareness, self trust. And then the next part, yeah, is how much do we trust that the other person can hear us, receive us, accept us, and reflect back to us?
Okay.
How much can we trust that our words, our vulnerability, our sharing is safe
Yeah.
with them? And we learn that through experience with the other person and
Mm-hmm.
then through discernment.
Mm.
I know that in my life, I'm guessing in your life as well, and to everybody listening, you could probably pinpoint some folks in your life that are the ones that whatever I tell this person, my words are safe with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's going to be other people in your life that, like, I don't share that much with this person. I don't share very vulnerably with this person. Not because they're a bad person, not because I don't care about them, but their capacity to receive me, hear me, be non judgmental, they're just not quite there. And
Yeah.
if I were to share my vulnerability with them, I might walk away more hurt than I came in.
Mm.
So we learn discernment of
Okay.
where we share our stories.
No, I'm a little speechless because then as you were saying that also, I was like, I wonder how much that plays into, because you know how they say, oh, when women communicate, everything is so emotional, or it's always like an emotional response. And it's like, no, it's really not. But I mean, I guess. So do you think taking that into consideration, that can help eliminate some of the emotional communication that they say most women bring in?
Yeah, I think also that, man, if we think about this kind of this construct that we have, right, of like society kind of pushes men towards being quiet, stoic, non-expressive. So again, one extreme end of the spectrum. And then the societal construct that women can be extremely emotional. Maybe
Mhm.
we used to call women hysterical. Um, these are long time held paradigms that we pass down generation through generation. And we often in society, we just accept that these are true.
Yeah.
But we can actually pause and ask ourselves, is this actually true? Is it true that men can't communicate and that women are over communicators? Or is it true that we're actually all individuals who, yes, we are influenced by the communication styles that we learned from our families, from our stories of origins, from the TV shows that we watch, from society, but that actually we can always change that. Men can learn to express and communicate, and women can learn to express and communicate in healthy ways as well.
Yeah.
It's so often, as humans, what we're trying to do is we're trying to find equilibrium, we're trying to harmonize.
Hmm.
And so we have these polarities of closed and open, right? The more closed one person is, the more open the other person might become to try to create an energy exchange here.
Mm.
If we can all meet each other more towards that middle, okay, now we can start to communicate.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes as women, and when we're functioning from maybe a not so aware state of what's going on for us internally. Right? We want to be heard so badly by our counterpart. If this masculine feminine dynamic, we want to be heard so much that we just get louder and we repeat the same thing over and over. We think that if we say the same thing in 4 different languages, that the other person, it's suddenly going to click.
And it doesn't.
Knocking on the wrong door with the wrong tone.
Yeah.
So for women, we need to learn, like, how do I communicate in such a way that the masculine can hear me? And men, if you have any desire to have a constructive relationship with the feminine, you're also going to need to learn how to listen, how to be open, how to be receptive to what she has to say. You're going to have to learn some reflective listening.
Yeah.
Because if she feels heard the first time she says something, she's not going to have to repeat it.
Yeah. And then everyone is like happy, like, oh, I felt heard. Now I know what my spouse wants. And we can kind of eliminate that.
Exactly. Then you don't have to guess what's on her mind if you ask. And women, men communicate a bit differently from us. And I know I'm throwing around these genders of men and women. I usually tend to speak more around like the masculine and feminine, but since we're here, we're gonna keep going with it. Just know that there are nuances. These are not black and white answers.
Yes.
Women tend to communicate in more abstract ways, more like a ball of yarn that is tangled up, right? We can go from this point to this one to over here. Like we're connecting 17 different dots all at once, and we blurt that out. The masculine is more of like A to B first. Okay, no, A to B, and now B to C. Okay, great. C to D. He wants linear.
Yeah.
You want loop-de-loops. And now we're struggling to communicate. So women, if there's something that we want to communicate to our partner who happens to be a man whose brain works a little bit more linearly like that, express one thing at a time to him. Express it, check in. Okay, we're on the same page. Great. Now, next thing. It's just that as women, we sometimes will rattle off a list of things we want to talk about. The other person has no idea where the starting point is. Men, they want to be responsive to us, right? Men are doers. The masculine energy is an action-oriented energy. So he's like, hey, give me an action. Tell me what you want clearly. I'll do it. But you got to tell me what it is.
Yeah.
You got to get clear about what that is first. Because if you don't know what you want, that poor man doesn't stand a chance.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm completely guilty of all of that. Although I've gotten better with that. I promise I have. Because now sometimes my husband, he's like, did you just start that whole conversation in your head and just tell me the part that applied to me and I'll think about it? I'm like, yeah, maybe I kind of did that. He said, well, can you start from the beginning so I can, figure out how you got there? Because that just was like really random. So exactly. I feel like you were talking directly to me and I'm like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, as women, we tend to cover the whole alphabet like in one sentence very quickly. And again, men are like, look, I am willing to navigate that alphabet with you, but I need some direction. A to B first.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I'm definitely going to take that tip, put it in my pocket, and make sure I exercise that later on in the day, because I'm pretty sure it'll come up.
We weren't expecting to talk about relationship advice here, but here we are again.
Yes.
It always ends up
Yeah, I mean, because if you think about it, whether you're talking to a friend, your mom, it's some kind of relationship experience, and it's all valid, guys. It's all valid.
Sure.
So I know one of the things that we had spoken about before was over communication. Can you explain a little bit more what over communication looks like? And then are there any scenarios where you don't really need to over communicate?
Great question. So sometimes over communication can come from, what we spoke about a moment ago of checking in with who am I sharing this information with, right? That discernment of, can the other person receive what I'm saying? Is this the appropriate person to share with? And am I sharing the appropriate things? Self-awareness, ownership first. Sometimes we might over communicate because we're feeling, again, nervous. We feel like we haven't been heard, and now we're dumping all of this at once on the other person. So we have to come in and check in with, again, what is my intended outcome of this?
Right.
Over communication can just be a symptom that we've got a lot of parts within us that want to be heard, but they need to be heard by us first. If we're over communicating, the other person, again, they might not know what it is that we're trying to say. They might have a blank, confused look on their face and say, all right, you said a lot of things like, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
What do you need me to do with this? And it's, again, because we've come in really unclear with ourselves. So if we have a practice of listening to ourselves, having, let's say, a journaling practice, I'm huge on journaling because journaling is communication between you and yourself and the different parts of all the pieces of you in your mind and your body that need to be heard.
Gotcha.
So practice over communicating with yourself first. And from that, you're going to start deciphering what it is that you're actually trying to say to the other person.
Oh, yeah. Because then you identify, okay, why do I feel like this? Where is this conversation supposed to go? And what exactly it is I'm trying to communicate with the opposite person. So thank you for that little gem because I never really thought about it like that. Journaling is like, I live for journaling sometimes, like depending on what's happening around me. I'm like, I journal like midday just to like either release the extra energy or just kind of like clear my mind. So that's I like that. So thanks for that.
Absolutely.
So I also learned that you are a Reiki practitioner. So my question was, is I've actually, gotten into it a little bit myself. And how do you see that practicing Reiki has actually improved communication or just helped you with your own listening skills? Because I know that there is like a component to just, center yourself and be quiet and just listen to the things around you.
Absolutely. So with Reiki, there's self Reiki that we can do with ourselves. That's a whole practice that you can get trained in, you can start working on. And then there's Reiki that we do with others, right? And Reiki is really another term for love, light force energy, truth, like goodness, God, whatever word resonates with you. It's this pure energetic frequency that we are all tapped into at all times. We
Yeah.
just have to remember that we're tapped into it.
Yeah.
And it's this energy that we can move through us, or, if you're a Reiki practitioner and you've got somebody on your table, you're working with them, you're helping them move that energy through them. And what I find it does in my life is it creates this beautiful sense of safety for me, a sense of feeling very held and supported, almost like I think of it as like a warm cocoon that I'm in, that I can just, like I can relax into, I can lean into, and I can trust. Now, if I'm in a state of feeling very trusting and supported and held, okay, now that I'm safe, now I'm able to explore, excavate, some deeper parts of myself that I maybe wasn't as aware of before.
Yeah.
A lot of the work that I do with others and the work that I do with myself is around looking at trauma, right? And it can be really, really, really big trauma, and it can be little trauma. Like trauma is trauma, right?
Yeah.
So my trauma is going to look different than your trauma. There's no like one definition for what that means, but when you're working through trauma, which can create a lot of constriction in the
Hmm.
body, constriction in our energy, in our throat chakra.
Hmm.
If we don't feel safe and we're trying to have a look at a traumatic experience that we had, we're not going to be able to come close to it because it's going to re-trigger this response in our body. We're going to shut down, push it away, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, like
Yeah.
whatever your response is going to be to that. If we start off with Reiki, if we start off with creating that sense of safety in our physical body, in our mind, in our spirit, and we say, okay, I am completely held right now. I can look at that experience and I know that I'm safe from being hurt by it again. I can come to it as close as I need to explore it. And I trust myself that if it becomes too intense, I can back away.
Yeah.
I'm supported. If we approach our healing from this space of knowing that we are safe, oh, okay, we can start doing this dance with our trauma a little bit more. We can uncover pieces if we're gentle with ourselves and we allow the space to, okay, I got to step back. We got really close to this thing. We looked, we analyzed, we learned some new things. Okay, I'm going to step away now. I'm going to integrate what I learned before I push myself to go, towards that trauma again.
Yeah.
For me, Reiki is really that gift of the container of safety to explore. And I love to use it with trauma work, but it's also something that you can use if your energy is low, you're feeling kind of sick, you're feeling kind of stressed, or maybe your energy is feeling great and you're like, you know what, I just want a little bit more pep in my step today. Not like, who doesn't want to feel better?
Yeah.
I sit down for 5 minutes, put my hand on my heart, my hand on my belly, and I breathe and I imagine that Reiki light just moving through me. I create that sense of cocooned safety again.
Yeah.
And now I can also approach my day from like a calm, grounded energy. It's like I feel myself sit up taller. I
Yeah.
feel more wise in my communication. I practice this before any session that I have with a client, but also before any of my business meetings, especially if it's one that like kind of nervous about, like there's
Yeah.
an exciting company that I'm talking to and maybe I'm feeling some imposter syndrome. Maybe I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, am I really good enough for this? I sit down with Reiki and I'm just reminded of like, oh, I am divine already. Everything around me is happening for my benefit.
Yeah.
Now I go into this meeting from a very, very, very different space. Clearly a huge Reiki fan, recommend it for everybody.
No, I'm totally with you because I can remember like the first time I tried it. Well, I did it twice in like the same session, but the first time I had attempted on someone else, I was like really nervous. Then by the second time, like I could almost immediately feel that like I was standing up straighter. I felt a little bit more confident. And this was like within like, I don't know, like a 10-minute span. And I was just like, oh wow. So I started to feel the difference in the change. And I'm like, oh, I can understand how this kind of brings a different level of balance because you're essentially like getting more in tune with your body and your inner self. And thus, if you can do that, then you can say what you need to say without the offense. Because I feel like that's just a big thing that everyone is trying to communicate, saying something without actually offending someone. Or if they are offending, how to like bring it back and just like not let it go off the deep end.
You're right. Like it gives you the ability to become more present, more aware, so that you're like, okay, what am I about to say to this other person? Is it going to be helpful? Can I listen to them? Right? Like if we're in our Reiki state, we're going to be much better at reflective listening, paying
Yeah.
attention to the other person. It's presence. It's about being present.
Yeah. No, I love that. Be more present, guys. It serves you, it serves you well. So you had mentioned imposter syndrome. So that's another thing that everyone practically deals with in every industry that they're in. So what are some key things that someone can do to improve their communication that will kind of alleviate that imposter feeling, especially like among entrepreneurs or young entrepreneurs, because I know that's a really big thing. We have chat GPT and all these, different AI tools on the market these days.
Yeah. Um, quick little touch point on chat GPT and these other tools. I think that there can be a space where those tools are helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to remember that muscles that we don't use atrophy, right? If you were to, get an injury and you were not able to walk for quite a long time, the muscles in your legs would atrophy. And when you were ready to get up and start moving around again, like you would have really weak legs. You would have
Right.
to rebuild that to be able to walk again. And so those first few walks, like you're probably going to be kind of wobbly.
Mm-hmm.
Thing with anything in our mind, use it or lose it. We've all heard that, right? Whatever we don't use atrophies.
Yeah.
So if we become reliant on other tools to communicate for us, we might atrophy our ability to communicate for ourselves. I can tell you that there is not an AI system out there that is ever going to know me internally better than I know myself.
Yeah.
So I anytime there's like automation of any sorts, I always just remind people of like, just be sure to not atrophy these great skills that you have and that you want to develop.
Yeah.
Like, what are we going to do in the future? Like, just walk around with like phones on our faces and like relying on our phones to communicate for us? Like, hey, Delia, I can't communicate what I'm trying to say. Like, um,
Like, do you understand me now?
exactly. Like, these things might work okay for writing, but we're humans. We still need to
Yeah.
know how to communicate face to face. So there's my take on that piece. When it comes to imposter syndrome, and your question was, like what are some tools that we can use to improve our experiences of it? I think sometimes just accepting like, hey, I might have experiences of imposter syndrome for the rest of my life.
Got it.
If I just imagine that this may be something I encounter in my experience of being a human for the rest of my life, then I don't need to get like scared or triggered anytime it comes up. I can say, oh, here you are, imposter syndrome, my old friend. Let's navigate this together, right? I don't have to try to resist it. I don't have to shame myself for like, oh, like I've been doing this for 30 years. Why do I still feel you're going to feel this way sometimes? Like,
Yeah.
let's accept it. Let's accept it's going to happen. And then let's plan for, how do I want to navigate this when it does happen? I always come back to self awareness. Like, if you have an awareness of the things that you're really good at, and you start reminding yourself of those things, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
start building that muscle of recognizing that actually you are competent. you are intelligent, you are capable.
Yeah.
You got to start having that internal dialogue of pointing out to yourself all the things that you are doing right. We're so good at pointing out our mistakes. All of us
Yeah.
have to be our own biggest critics. We need to become our biggest cheerleaders.
Yeah.
If we don't want to feel knocked down by imposter syndrome, if we don't want it to close up our throat chakras or keep us from moving towards our dreams, we got to start noticing that that imposter syndrome voice in our head is just one voice.
Yeah.
We have the choice to listen to the other one that is like, you're doing a fantastic job. Even though this stuff is really hard, look at how well you're managing it. Look at where you were a year ago and where you are now. See how much you've learned. We've got to have that loving conversation with ourselves to manage that imposter syndrome voice that, again, is inevitably going to come up. Another thing we can do is listen to the people who we trust have our best interest in mind. So, my best friend in the entire world, she's known me for a really long time. And from time to time, I'll send her a message and I'm like, I'm feeling insecure about this thing. I don't know if I can trust myself with this. She'll get back to me and she's like, I've seen you navigate situations way harder than this. She's like, I trust you with you. Like,
Oh.
I trust you with you. I know that you know how to navigate this situation.
Yeah.
She's this external observer. I think of our friends as like, they are our memory keepers.
Yeah.
She remembers things about me that sometimes I don't even remember. And if I'm in that turbulent state of, am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Do I know how to manage this? She's like, girl, of course you do. Like, let me remind you of all the ways that you have handled this before. You're fine.
Yeah.
And we use voice messaging back and forth a lot with each other. And I will star, and so will she, star the messages where we're giving each other this cheerleading advice and these
Oh.
reminders of like, I know that she's not BSing me. She's not blowing smoke up my ass.
Yeah.
She's reminding me of the accomplishments that I actually have already done. Like, I already did the work.
Yeah.
And when I'm feeling turbulent, I'll go back and I trust her. And I trust that she calls me out when, like, if I am not aligned with my integrity, she's like, maybe we want to look at that. You think of yourself? Kind of sounds like I'm lying to yourself right now.
Yeah.
So I trust her. And so if those voices, those turbulent voices are getting kind of loud, I'll go, all right, if I don't feel like I can trust myself right now, let me listen to somebody that I do trust who has my best interest in mind and is always honest with me.
Yeah.
So keep a folder on your desktop, keep a folder in your phone of those reminders that actually, like, you do know what you're doing. You
Yeah.
got
No, I absolutely love that idea because I'm like, oh, because a lot of times we're sitting on Instagram and all these other platforms and we're liking and commenting, from strangers, but it's also nice to have like that same trend with the people that actually know you best in an intimate form. So that's cool. And you'll have like your own I don't know, praise vision board um kind of a thing happening. And whenever you're feeling, a little blue, you automatically have that one thing, but like, no, this is what so and so said about me, and now I feel great.
yeah, like, I am amazing, actually.
Yeah.
It's right. Like, she's smart. I trust her. Like, she's right. All right. I just lost sight of that for a second. Like, getting back on track now.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that idea. That was like genius, seriously. And just to like piggyback off of that a little bit, because it was also, I was reading something like earlier in the week and you touched on friendships, and I came across something about friendship red flags. And I just wondered, Um, if you find that you're in a friendship where the communication isn't that great, is that a good time to like run for the hills, or should you just like take a step back and try to figure out how to improve that communication? Because I do feel like that is something people tend to run away from too often. It's like, oh, maybe just like invest in it a little bit, but then I just don't know if that's the rainbows and butterflies that kind of exist in my world and in my head.
Great question, because you're right. Probably a lot of people navigate this. I know I definitely have had to navigate that at times, and ask myself, like, okay, is this a healthy, mutually beneficial friendship, or have we run our course? Have we come to the end of our story together, and it would be most healing for us to split ways?
Right.
I think we need to diagnose the situation. Like, okay, what's actually happening here? If I feel like we're struggling with communication, I got to identify, well, what is the actual struggle? Is it that I don't feel heard? Is it that the other person interrupts me? Is it that they tell me what they think I should do? They give me their opinions and their advice when I didn't ask for it? Like, it could be all sorts of things. Is it that when we're together, it feels like they're not present and they're talking to me while they're on the phone, right?
Yeah.
We have to understand what is the problem first. So we do that by doing some internal exploration, right? Doing some journaling, asking yourself questions. Once you have identified what the problem is for you, then I recommend having a conversation with the other person, right? Like giving the other person an opportunity to to talk to you about this and to change, for both of
Yeah.
you to change if they want to. If a friendship is worth keeping, then it's a relationship. It's going to require two people saying, "Hey, it's worth it for me to do the work to stay connected to you and to continue this going forward." So his best friend that I mentioned, her name is Marissa, by the way. She's my favorite person in the
Hey,
world.
Marissa.
Hey, Marissa. She'll be excited to hear this. And she'll be like, oh, yeah, these voice messages. um, so earlier on or not earlier on, but like almost 10 years ago, maybe like 7-ish years ago in our friendship, we were both in our mid late 20s in these relationships that were these relationships had some issues. There were some
Right.
flats, right? And we were like both committed to these relationships, like long-term relationships, and we would go back and forth and like, tell each other like, oh, I can't believe you did this, da da da. And we had the same story over and over. I would have the same story every week to tell her. She would have the same story to tell me every week. And we were not aware of this, but both of us were getting really tired of hearing the same
Story.
story. Like, oh my gosh, like you keep picking the same thing, right? Like, why don't you just do something different? So we're simultaneously feeling frustrated with each other. We're giving each other unsolicited advice constantly. And what's happening is, like I'm on my way to work, I'm listening to a voice message from her where she's telling me about this thing that her boyfriend has done all over again. And now I'm assuming that it's my responsibility to fix this for her, right? So
Mm.
now I put my energy into giving her all of my advice. And then when she doesn't follow my advice, I'm frustrated that she hasn't done that. I've just made this whole thing about me. On her end, she's, having a moment. She's in a stressed space. She wants to communicate this. She didn't ask for her best friend's advice. Her best friend is not validating how she's feeling. Her best friend is just making her feel worse because she's in the same cycle all over again. So
Mm.
now she doesn't feel heard by her boyfriend. She doesn't feel heard by her best friend. And now she's angry. We got into this scenario over and over, the both of us, right? So sometimes it was me giving unsolicited advice, sometimes it was her. And we were butting heads. Now, these are two people who love each other dearly.
Yeah.
And we were just clashing and we're like, why are we fighting? And we realized that it was this. We were taking on this responsibility of trying to fix our best friend's life because we love each other,
Yeah.
but not actually giving the other person what she needed, which was just to be heard. So
Mm.
we established this, like this rule, this guideline in our friendship, in our relationship. And we said, hey, if we're gonna share some heavy stuff like this, we are going to start the conversation by stating to the other person what it is that we need. We have been doing this for years now, and it works beautifully. We start the conversation with, I just need to dump and I just need you to listen.
Yeah.
Now, right off the bat, the other person knows what's expected of them. They don't need to come up with any solutions. They
Yeah.
don't need to think about advice. They don't need to put any energy into this. All we're asking for is like, can you just witness me and what I'm experiencing? So
Oh.
they're free to just listen now.
Yeah.
When we do want advice, we very, very clearly communicate, hey, can you share your insights with me about this? Can you give me your opinion? What do you think? And just naturally, we've done this for so long now that we tend to start our communication that way, and then we end it as well with like, hey, so just if there's anything you want to share, I'm open to hearing it from you.
Mm.
Now we give the other person an opportunity because we've given them permission, we've given them consent.
Yeah.
This has revolutionized our friendship, and it's something that once she and I started practicing it together, then we started practicing it in our relationships. Wow, communication became a lot easier there. You know, I teach leadership skills and I teach leaders this, like, ask before, and then those leaders start practicing it at home, their
Yeah.
spouses. And so again, sorry, backtracking to your original question about friends. Diagnose what is the problem and then come up with an agreement of what can we agree to change to make this better going forward.
Yeah.
Both people have to agree to it. Both people have to practice it. You're going to stumble through it.
Yeah.
But if either party is not willing to do that work, now you are at a crossroads where you have to decide, is this friendship worth keeping, or is this actually the appropriate time to separate?
Yeah.
Check in before just running away, right? There could be a really wonderful friend. You guys are just miscommunicating. If
Yeah.
she and I had broken up our friendship when we were butting heads, like that would have been one of the biggest loss in both of our lives. So don't run away yet. Unless the other person is like abusive, right? If you're in any form of an abusive relationship or friendship,
Yeah.
talk to a therapist about this, right? Don't subject yourself to abuse. But if it's not at that extreme, check in. Give the
Yeah.
other person an opportunity.
No, I love that. That's beautiful. My best friend and I actually started implementing that on accident. Like she'll just start the conversation. She's like, "Oh, just hear me out." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm just going to be quiet." So I love that correlation. That you've given away so much information today. It was all relative, even if you felt like, you kind of went off in a different direction, it was still equally important because everyone that's listening, it was just something that they could relate to. Because I know I was having a ton of aha moments on the other side of the screen. I'm like, oh yeah, we could do this, we could do that. So everything you said was valid, much appreciated. So where can people get some leadership skills? How can they find you to communicate better? Where are you found and how can people connect with you?
Perfect. So a few different ways. They can find me on Instagram at Practical Alchemy Counseling. They can look me up by my name, Leilany Lima. I'm sure you're going to have that
I
in the
will.
yes.
Yep.
And they can also go to my website, which is practic-al.com. So it's like practical, but the little dash there for Practical Alchemy. So if
Yeah.
it's Practical Alchemy, you can find me, or again, just my name, Leilany Lima. You can find me that way as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for sharing your experience, your knowledge. I had a ton of fun. I hope you did as well. And I'm looking forward to, staying connected to you and just learning and growing, because that's what this whole spiel is. It's just an ongoing process, and any way you can, or anything you can do to just be a better person and show up differently for people, why the hell not do it? Um, So thank you again. And guys, I will catch you again next week on another great episode so we can navigate this thing through life. You are not alone. And if no one has told you today, remember you are strong, you are worthy, and you are enough. And I'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.